Welcome to Reflections, a program where we discuss values and virtues for the transformation of the individual and the society in general. I am Father George Ehusani, and today I have something special. I am going to read a letter that someone wrote to me, someone who has worked for many years of her life in Nigeria and then went to England for a job, a new job. And while there, just after the first couple of months, she sent me a letter, which I think our viewers need to hear. She said, among other things she said in a letter sent to me, she said, on a personal level, I have been experiencing a sense of freedom in the last few weeks, like a weight has been lifted off my chest and I can breathe more easily now. I am still trying to understand the nature of the shackles from which I have been released. I think part of it is just the day-to-day stress of life in Nigeria, of running a household without the benefit of simple domestic amenities. But it goes beyond that. I am also feeling a sense of liberation from the societal expectations that define much of life in Nigeria. There is so much pressure back home to achieve some socially constructed benchmarks of domestic and marital and professional and economic success. Now I have been transplanted to a different society, and I discovered that there are many things that seemed to matter to me only because they mattered to others. I own a house. I do not own a house. It is not important for anyone here in England. What matters is that I have a roof over my head and a bed to sleep in at night. I own a car. I do not own a car. No one really cares. What matters is that I am able to move around as needed. In the office, all that counts is that I contribute positively to achieving our mission and that I am pleasant and easy to work with. In Abuja, colleagues are judging you by your clothing labels, your hairstyle, your makeup, or in my own case, lack of it, who you know, and who your husband or father is, which school your kids attend, when last you went on holidays abroad, etc., etc. Here, the boss sits in a cubicle beside me, wears jeans and a t-shirt to the office, and rides the bus to work each day. His job is to serve the team, as is mine. There is no hierarchy. So there is no reason to want to climb over the other to get to the top. Staff are respected for their personal qualities and actions and contributions, and not for their personal circumstances. At least that has been my experience so far. I would like to think that I have always been sufficiently confident as a person not to be bothered by these societal expectations. But I recognize now that I am breathing more freely, that I was actually enslaved by several of these societal expectations. The reality is that much as we might be able to reject the expectations of society more generally, it is more difficult to free ourselves from the expectations of our loved ones, which in turn are shaped by the same society. In any case, this culture shock, if I could call it that, will hopefully lead me to a reflection and discernment of what really matters to me, so that I stop struggling to get to some place that I do not even really care to be, just because society or my parents or even my husband says it is important to get there. Father George, thank you for asking after me. I am sorry that this email is so long. I have been planning to put down some reflections on my time here, and I got carried away when I started typing. I would love to hear what you think about these last couple of paragraphs in the light of your psycho-spiritual expertise. Now I turn to welcome Dr. Joanna Nwosu. Dr. Joanna Nwosu, you are welcome to the studio.
Thank you, Father.
Dr. Nwosu wrote this letter. She had worked with me at the Catholic Secretariat for many years in the early 2000s, and then she also worked with me in Lux Terra, and she's still supporting us very much. And then she has worked with Catholic Relief Services, with USAID, and went to work for International AIDS Alliance, and is back to Catholic Relief Services as Deputy Country Representative. Dr. Nwosu, you're welcome. And do you remember this letter I just read?
I do remember the letter, Father.
For me, the letter is power-packed because as soon as I received this letter, I was teaching at the Psychospiritual Institute in Nairobi, and once I read it, I went straight back to class. It was break time. I went straight back to class, and I read this letter to my class, the master students in psychospiritual therapy. And this constituted the content, the subject of our discussion for the next 2 hours. Because we were discussing the whole issue of maturity and growth. Psycho-spiritual maturity, psycho-spiritual growth. And how many people in our environment are growing up 40, 50, 60 and are still like teenagers. And do things because others are doing it. People wear clothes, and you ask them, why are you wearing clothes? That's the trend. People wear hairstyles. They may not even have sat down to think, do they like this hairstyle? Or do they like this clothes? It's just because others are wearing it. So it was quite fascinating for me and my class to read this mail. And I thought I should bring you to the studio, now that you are back to this same environment, to bring you to the studio to ask, what led to this kind of reflection? And you spent a couple of more months in England after you wrote this letter. And would you say there are certain things you have discovered about yourself vis-a-vis the individual versus the society she lives in, and how you can live a life according to your own values, according to your own purpose? You remember Dick Warren's book, The Purpose-Driven Life. This kind of reflection that is expressed in your letter, how have you gone further in this reflection? How have you probed yourself further in terms of where you stand, the choices you make versus what society expects of you? I can see that you are still not putting on makeup. So, what do you have to say to I really want to interrogate this whole thesis of many of us in this society are living just by societal expectation and are hardly asking, what do I want? Even our religious persuasions, I'm wondering, with this widespread follow, I'm wondering how deeply convinced people are of their religious persuasions. Or is it just family, friends are going in one direction, so everybody goes in that direction?
Thank you, Father, and thank you for the opportunity to be on the show, Reflections. So you've asked a lot of things, and maybe just to start from where I was at when I wrote the letter, like you had explained, I had been 2 months out of Nigeria. I've lived in Nigeria all my life, and for the first time I was living away from my family. And I think that the fact that I was away from my family helped to create the environment for me to be able to reflect.
It's like a retreat.
It was like a retreat, because as you know, like one of the things I had alluded to in the letter is that here in Nigeria, I mean, I have a large family, and it's challenging running a household in Nigeria. So between family, work, and other social engagements, you really don't have as much time as you would like
to reflect,
to be able to reflect. So I was away from family. I didn't have too many domestic responsibilities, and so I had that opportunity to do that reflection. And I think what was most striking to me was just a sense of freedom. I had this sense as if something had been lifted off my shoulders. Perhaps the first, I would say, sign, that something very concrete that I can put forward as an example. When I was leaving to take up a job at a relatively high level in an organization in the UK. And so that reflected in the way that I packed when I was leaving.
You packed the kind of clothes that a high-level bureaucrat.
I had all my suits, and my best shoes and my jewelry and things like that, thinking that, okay, I needed to dress a certain way as what would be expected.
Yeah.
Yes. But then the very first day I walked into the office,
you were overdressed.
I was very overdressed. Because everybody else was dressed very simply. And then I walked in and, everybody was sitting. It was an open office. Everybody was sitting in a cubicle. From the executive director down to the administrative assistant, everyone had the same size of cubicle, the same chair, the same type of computer. And then, in your cubicle, you could, make it up nicely, anyhow you wanted, decorate it, to personalize it, but it's a cubicle.
You can be seen.
Right. And if you needed to have meetings that required a bit more privacy, there were so many meeting rooms, and you could book a meeting room to have a meeting. So, things that required that type of privacy, there's provision for that. But the first thing, that was really fascinating for me to see an office where the so-called bosses just sit on the open floor with everyone else. And of course, that directly affects your sense of how approachable they are, because
the space you create.
Yes, the space you create around yourself, and the messaging that comes from the senior management is that, well, it's an open office, it's a transparent office, you can come over, and talk to anyone at any time. And then, of course, like I said, the other element of the dressing. So, very quickly, I realized that pretty much 70 or 80% of the clothing I had bought,
you don't need them.
I had brought along with me, that I didn't need them, and I, quickly reverted to, wearing
bottom box. Put them in the bottom box.
to wearing, simple trousers and maybe a light sweater or something, and that became my default kind of dress to the office. And that made me start thinking about people like Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg, who have spoken severally about, the way they dress. The late Steve Jobs would always wear a black turtleneck and jeans, and Mark Zuckerberg wears a grey t-shirt on jeans, and that's their standard apparel. And they've spoken severally to how much time and energy it saves them having to think about, oh, this is what I'm going to wear today. Because I promise you that the average Nigerian lady, probably starts planning what she's going to wear to the office the night before, because you're thinking about whether, this handbag matches this pair of shoes, and, what necklace are you going to put on. And for some people, they actually want to match the color of their nail polish. Wow. And their toenail polish to the bags with the lipstick. With the lipstick, and we spend so much energy doing all of that. But then the most makeup that I saw most of the ladies in the office wearing was maybe a little light lipstick, and that would be it. And I've never been someone who wears makeup, so.
But are you implying that it is the environment that created that for Nigerian ladies? That is to say, the trouble they take to make sure that they had a color of shoe that matches the bag, that matches the lipstick, that matches. Are you implying that it is the environment that created that perhaps in another environment, these same Nigerian ladies may not get into all that trouble?
Yes, with a caveat. So my caveat is this, Father. I think that people exist on a spectrum. There are some people who are very interested in fashion. Okay. And even if you put them in an environment where the majority of women were very modest in, their dressing, one or two would always, really want to dress and stand out. That's nature. So people are always on a spectrum, from very sophisticated in their mode of dressing to very simple. But what I think is happening in Nigeria is that the environment has kind of created a situation where that spectrum is skewed towards the side of the
show business,
of the very sophisticated. Yes. And people who perhaps by nature might not be inclined to do that, they feel pressure to be that way. And I'll give you a practical example. I've worked in several offices in Nigeria, and I know that my colleagues have repeatedly put pressure on me to say, you don't wear makeup, if you just put on a little makeup,
just a little more touch.
Yes, a little more touch, and some of them would even offer to take me for a makeover, to go and have a feel of what it's like, and I have nothing against makeup, but
it's not my thing.
It's just not my thing. And also, Father, it costs a lot of money to buy makeup. The average foundation costs about 15,000 naira for a good quality one. So you're going to buy foundation, and then you have toners, and you have lipsticks, and you have eyeshadows.
You have perfect finish.
Yes. I mean, if you watch some of these videos where you see people doing makeovers, there are about 4 or 5 layers that are applied on the face before you get to the point where you're putting on your lipstick and doing up your eyes.
And do that before you go out for most major things.
So, I'm getting older, as you know, Father, and, a little bit of vanity now. Like, okay, I'm getting older, maybe a little bit of makeup would be a good idea to, enhance certain features and things like that. So I went on YouTube to look for simple makeovers, simple makeup. And the simplest makeup video I could find on YouTube involved 10 products.
10?
10. This is the simplest that I could find. You needed at least 10 products for the complete look. And so you have 10 products, and you have, maybe it's going to take you some time to put that on. And not just that, Father. I mean, I think during the course of the day, if my eyes, I wear glasses, maybe my eyes started to ache and I had to take off my glasses. I can't rub my eyes, because if I rub my eyes, I'm going to smear my makeup.
So you need to have some in your bag.
Yes. So you go into the ladies' room and you're touching it up, in the course of the day. And, for me, it's a lot of effort. And I think if it's really important to you to do that and look that way, then that's a personal choice. But I do feel that there are a lot of people who are under pressure to do this because they see a lot of young ladies doing it.
It's a personal choice.
Yes.
I think that is a societal construct. I am wondering whether those who make that choice make that choice really freely.
And
you see, when you talk about human free choice, I'm wondering whether they make that choice really freely. If they make that choice because of immaturity and a sense of insecurity, and the fact that they feel, if I do not appear this way, I am not in the club, I may be seen as poor or lowly or whatever. I really wonder whether you can call that a free choice.
Yeah, well, so I cannot say for sure. I mean, okay, let me use another example related to makeup. And we're dwelling a lot of makeup. I mean, there's a lot of other things. But let's look at makeup, Father. There is this thing called, this trend towards bridal makeup. You have special makeup artists who do bridal makeup.
I have seen a couple of those. And I have prepared couples for a wedding. And on the day of wedding, I didn't recognize the bride. And I had to probe to make sure it is the same woman that we had prenuptial practice yesterday that is sitting down.
Yes, and then Father, to get a makeup artist, they're called makeup artists now, to do your bridal makeup. Makeup artists would give you, the cost for a regular makeover is 10,000 naira, but for bridal makeup, it's 100,000 naira. And there are bridal makeup artists that charge as much as 500,000 to do bridal makeup.
So those things I see. Huh?
Yes. And so I have observed, and I know ladies who have been preparing for marriage and have been under a lot of pressure to get a makeup artist to do a bridal makeover for them. And, as you know, Father, I have children in their 20s. And so I follow a lot of young people on social media just to keep up with what's going on in the life of this kind of age group. And you see a lot of conversations about this. And so just to link this to what you were saying about being perceived to be poor, I think that there are a lot of young people who would say, well, it doesn't make sense for me to spend 100,000 naira on bridal makeup given where I am in life now. But the same young people would say of someone using 500,000 for bridal makeup would say, yes, if she can afford it, why not? And so, I'm beginning to think that, okay, if they could afford it, they would probably do the same. So that's where I see the little bit of like the societal construct towards what is important. It's like saying it's important to do a bridal makeover, even though maybe I can't afford the high-end one now, but if I could, when it's time to wed, why not?
All these things, we have just talked about makeup and dress, but all these things, what do they say about people's orientations towards what Christianity will see as vanity, what the Judeo-Christian religion will see as vanity?
Right.
How do they, because I see all this, and even the opinions of the young people you are talking about, I see it as vanity of vanities, all is vanity. And that if this is what is important, and a young woman preparing for marriage is really troubled about looking for money to get, either the 10,000 version or the 20 or 100,000 version, I really see that priorities are misplaced.
Yeah.
There are children in this country, in several parts of this country, that are out of school because of 5,000 naira.
Absolutely.
So when people spend 50,000 naira, 100,000 naira for a makeup artist to do whatever for wedding, I think they are wasting precious resources of God. That's my opinion. So what does it say about what people even think of their responsibility in terms of using the resources of nature?
And this is where I see this big disconnect. So just like you said, Father, I think the Christian faith, at least, emphasizes modesty,
frugality.
Simplicity, frugality, humility.
And specifically, the Bible specifically mentioned simplicity in dress, and tells women that your beauty is not in these external adornments, but internal.
Yes, and emphasizes internal beauty. And I think also to some extent the Muslim religion also prescribes modesty and simplicity as a virtue. So the question that you raised is very pertinent in a country where we're majority Christian and Muslim. How is it then that the virtues of these religions do not seem to be coming through in the choices that we make?
We are beginning to see circumstances where those who call themselves Christians and Muslims, religious people, are becoming so vain in the choices they make about what kind of house they live in, what kind of cars they drive. So consumeristic, so materialistic, that I am wondering whether all these religious activities, whether there's any depth of spirituality at all.
Indeed, and I probably don't want to go into blaming churches, but we all know, and it's common knowledge in Nigeria that the whole movement towards prosperity preaching, and come here and get your millions, come here and free yourself from the shackles of poverty, presenting Christianity at least as a channel to wealth. So maybe my generation, perhaps most of us didn't start off in those kind of churches. Many people of my generation were initiated into faith in Orthodox churches, and then many have shifted, to different denominations. But there are children who, from their infancy, were brought up in that kind of environment where what they learn in church is focused on your miracle, your job, your house, your car, your husband, and all the other things it's perhaps not surprising that you see a generation of 20-something and 30-something year olds that are strongly focused on materialism, because that's what they've been taught matters from their youth.
And this is fueling corruption in our society.
Absolutely.
I mean, a society that is so highly focused on what you wear, how you appear, what you consume, how much you're able to consume, what car you ride in, what part of town you live in. And it is pushing people. There's a lot of pressure pushing people into stealing what does not belong to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know that there are stories of children, some of these children of the rich, where if the car that takes them to school, the Jeep or the Mercedes-Benz or the Lexus that takes them to school, if it's spoiled and the father asks for a small Toyota to take them to school, they refuse to enter that car because they say their schoolmates will laugh at them if they get to the school gate and come out of this kind of
rickety. Show up. Yes, and those pressures are there.
Now, so you are right, and I will say that you shouldn't hesitate in putting some of the blame at the footstep of religious leaders. If religious leaders are showing off their custom design suits
and their private jets,
if religious leaders are showing off their private jets and their Lamborghini, then what do you expect of the membership? So something is really, really wrong. A lot has been spoken about this this anomaly called the prosperity gospel. Our religion is focused on the cross of Christ. A lot has been spoken about the anomaly called the prosperity gospel, but it is so attractive to our people because it satisfies a natural human instinct. I do say that the human being created in the flesh, we have a tendency to want to be riveted to earth and gather all the things of earth. And so when you hear the message of the prosperity gospel, oh, it's sweet music to the ear. The one of the cross is not very attractive.
Yeah, and Father, I think also from a sociological perspective, the fact that we struggle, a large proportion of our population struggles to meet their basic needs, also helps to make the prosperity gospel so attractive. Because if we can go back again to the scenario in England, most people in England are not religious, but when it comes to giving to charity,
they give more.
They give more. They give their time, they give their resources, and it's fairly common to see an English person who would opt to live in a more modest abode and rather give the money to charity than it is in Nigeria. Yeah. Many of us in Nigeria, we give from our surplus. I mean, I don't know any wealthy person in Nigeria that has opted to live in a small house.
Yeah, I think we have, I don't know, it is, some people call it scarcity mentality.
Scarcity mentality.
That scarcity mentality, meaning that people are coming out of poverty, and they are so scared about receding back to the poverty.
Absolutely.
So they gather like rats that gather a lot of things to the hole. A lot of things, if you go into the hole of a rat, you discover so many things the rat will never need. But the rat just keeps gathering
it. And I think this is true, because it's like I look at my, maybe I can use my own kids as an example. We have struggled to give them most of the things that they need. And I find that my children don't get unduly fascinated about wearing clothing or wearing it's like if you offer my son and say well, let's go to the market, let's go shopping for clothes, he would say to you, I have clothes already. I have enough clothes already. But you can imagine a child who had grown up maybe never owning a new pair of shorts and always had to wear the hand-me-downs, and perhaps even at Christmas had longed for new clothing
and
never got, and then suddenly
he finds himself in position.
Found himself, and I think something had been done to the psyche of that child.
Like going to school without shoes and suddenly becoming a big executive. You are likely to have 1,000 shoes, a pair of shoes.
And I don't think sometimes I think it's not very conscious. I think something has just happened in the psyche of that person.
It's a pathology, actually.
It is a pathology, and then there's that inclination to get more things and more things and more things, and it has to be a pathology, because if you look at the way that we try to amass wealth in Nigeria, it doesn't make any sense from a practical perspective. You have so much money that you can't spend it, your children can't spend it, your grandchildren can't spend it.
We had on this studio, on this program, we had a psychologist from Kenya who came, and when we were talking about some big politicians with 5, 10, 20 cars, exotic cars, he just told us that the politician is not buying cars. I said, what's he buying? He said, no, he's not buying cars. I said, he has Lamborghini, he has Bentley, he said, no, he's not buying cars. He says, he's buying toys. The toys he has missed as a child.
Absolutely.
That until such a person goes through therapy.
Right.
Meaning that the average Nigerian was traumatized as a child on account of poverty, on account of all kinds of circumstances, needs to go through some counseling, some therapy, so that he or she knows that this little that I have is okay. Otherwise, it keeps trying to make up for what he missed or she missed as a child.
Yeah.
So some of the problems you are lamenting, therefore, to conclude this segment of our program, some of the problems you are lamenting in your letter, they will be on account of some societal pathology.
And this is why, when I wrote all this, I had said, Father, in the light of your recent psycho-spiritual experiences, because I know you've been reading around all these things, you've been teaching around them, you know, what can you say about, you know, this comparison between the two cultures?
Precisely what came out from your letter, and as we discussed it in class with the master's degree students, it was about the fact that people need to be healed of primitive greed, healed of a sense of insecurity, deep feeling of insecurity in many people. Because when people feel secure, when people are confident about who they are, when people are confident about what their purpose is in life, they have a focus, they have an orientation, so they will not be easily swayed. What did my little child Dominic called it last Sunday? That the winds that blow will not easily sway you if you are solidly based.
You are grounded.
On that note, we will bring this segment of our program to an end. I have been discussing with Dr. Nwosu on the pressures, the societal pressures in Nigeria that make people live lives of vanity, that make people desire to to have all the clothes, all the shoes, all the makeup, which perhaps deep within them they may not desire, they may not really want, but in order to satisfy the society around, the family, the friends, so that they can fit in. What we desire in this program, since we are for values and virtues, is that people live a purpose-filled life, a life of focus, where you know where you are going, you know what the Lord God desires of you, and you are following it. It doesn't matter what the people around, what choices the people around are making. On that note, we will bring this segment to an end. It's wonderful having you, Dr. Nwosu, and we will have another segment to discuss more of this pathology that we are talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Father.
We might come back to the same issue of public funds being spent for the 2019 elections after that election, given what is going on. I don't think lessons have been learned even by those who are prosecuting the perpetrators of the 2015 election fraud. So I worry that those who are prosecuting people who stole public funds to run elections have not taken the lessons from what they are prosecuting others for.
As a Pan-Africanist, nothing has pained me more than this idea of that the North is educationally backward. Because for me, it goes to the core of racism, that black people are accepting, I'm stupid, yes, I am stupid, lower the mark for me. That's basically what the
so that's what you mean by lack of a sense of shame.
Exactly. How can we as Africans accept that a group of us in a part of Nigeria are saying, yes, we are stupid, yes, we cannot learn, so as a result of that, lower the cutoff mark so that I can pass. This is something that we as a country really needs to say. This is unacceptable. We need to be able to say, no, there is nothing wrong with the intellect of a northerner. There's nothing wrong with the learning ability of a child in northern Nigeria. What is missing, that they don't have the support that they need. And as a country, we should be able to say, no, as black people, we're not going to accept that there's a part of this country that says, I am stupid, I cannot learn.
Those who have money, or even the very average person, he tries every penny he has, sells his property, and he now says, okay, they've killed the universities here. A-levels aren't even good here. You send your children abroad. You are running a risk.
Seriously.
You are bringing up, children are being raised in an environment that's not your own cultural environment. So they are going to imbibe funny values.
And come back and you don't recognize your own children.
Exactly. Then what investment have you made for your old age? They are out there in that country. And when they see the goodies out there, many of them, they become so skewed, they don't even want to come back. So you are going to have another generation of
Nigerians who cannot relate with Nigeria.
Then successful parents, in quotes, their children have done well academically, and they are going to be left to live their old age in misery and loneliness.
I have with me in the studio once again Dr. Joanna Nwosu. Dr. Nwosu, you're welcome.
Thank you, Father.
Dr. Nwosu, the last time we discussed your letter, the letter you wrote to me on leaving Nigeria and getting to an organization in the UK and what your impressions were with regard to a sense of freedom, as if some weight had been lifted up your shoulders, and you began to reflect on the fact that the pressures on people in this country, whether you have a car, what kind of car, whether you have a house, what kind of house, which part of town you live, that your makeup and so on. We dealt a lot with the issue of makeup and so on and so forth. Now, in this segment, I want us to discuss where we ended. We ended on the note of there must be some element of social pathology in our society. Is it coming out of 400 years of slave trade, inferiority complex, coming out of our experience of slave trade, our experience of colonialism, whereby the average person in our society suffers a loss of confidence, some shortfall in self-confidence. Why is it that the white man in England, in America, who is a boss at work, who is a chief executive, can wear short knicker and go around, and he doesn't feel any, and nobody really says that he is a poor man on account of wearing short knicker and going around. But in this society, the boss has to show it that he's a boss. From the car he comes out of, and the dress he wears, the size of his table in the office. What do you think? I mean, like we said the other time, there's something really, really wrong, because I see it as all contributing towards the level of corruption in this society.
Absolutely.
There is corruption everywhere in the world, but the degree of corruption in our society is horrendous. If people are under pressure to get a big house, even when all their children have gone away, and it's only the man and his wife, they are still building 10-room houses.
Yeah.
They are under pressure to buy expensive cars. They are under pressure to live in an expensive part of town. Won't all this lead to temptation to steal what does not belong to you?
I think it will, and I find it interesting, Father, the issue you raised about inferiority complex, years of slavery, colonialism, and so on. Because I think, based on a little bit of the reading that I have done, that in many of our cultural societies, there were values that were held dearly by the majority of the population. I mean, integrity was really important. And even though, at least in the Igbo culture that I come from, wealth has always been respected, but wealth at that time was a reflection of hard work.
Yes.
It was, the man who was the very valiant hunter, for example, or the man who was a very strong farmer, became wealthy. So the respect for wealth was indirectly a respect for hard work. And side by side with that, there were people who were not wealthy, but were upright. And they were equally respected within the community for their uprightness. I think somewhere along the line, we seem to have lost that and began to focus so much more on just wealth without looking at where it has come from. And I have read some people theorizing that it has something to do with, when the white man came and colonized us, and the district was it the district
officer,
district officer at the time, would have his men around him and show some power, and then that became something that people aspired to be able to have power and lord it over other people.
We lost on account of the years of foreign exploitation by way of slavery and then colonialism. We lost the sense of who we are and began to see ourselves from a comparative point of view. And then the white man came with all the indices and symbols of power,
right,
and wealth, and we began
to aspire to that. I mean, back in colonial times, maybe in a place like Lagos, the white men lived in Ikoyi, in the big houses, the upstairs.
Yes.
And then you go to a place like Ebutemeta where the civil servant type, who were like the elite of the local people, would live in their little bungalows and shacks. And then, you look at those people and it's like they are on top and you are down. So the whole fabric of what society was like.
Our housing has been so segregated in much of Africa, because in the Igbo society, traditional society you are talking about, in the traditional society of the Yorubas or the Hausa or many places, the big man and the poor man lived in the same part of the village.
In the same
So
compound.
they lived in the same
Maybe
compound.
someone had a larger hut.
Yes.
And then the brother who was perhaps not as wealthy had a smaller hut,
but in the same environment.
Place.
Now you have the brother who is not doing very well living in one-man village or Maraba, and then the brother who is doing very well living in Asokoro or Metama. So there is a segregation even from point of view of where people live.
And that then puts pressure. So, you live in one-man village, for example, in a very comfortable apartment. But when people ask you where do you live and you say you're in one-man village. You are ashamed to say you live in one-man village. Yes. And then they ask you, when are you going to upgrade? When are you going to move from one-man village? And then you feel like, okay, maybe I need to make more money or steal more money to be able to leave one-man village and perhaps move to Gerikitu or Wusetu or somewhere so that you can say, I live in town now. And I'm trying to link that up to, what I was writing about pressures about, you own a house, you don't own a house, you live in this neighborhood, you don't live in this neighborhood. These are real pressures. And even for people who ordinarily might not.
You see, this is where leaders have a responsibility, including religious leaders, in helping to build people up with a sense of who they are, with a sense of their purpose in life. I mean, somebody's purpose in life may be to be a successful businessman. Another person's purpose in life may be to be a teacher.
Absolutely.
To realize his purpose being a teacher of children and find fulfillment. So he will not be a millionaire.
Absolutely.
Because no one ever becomes a millionaire by teaching children.
Right.
But he's producing the millionaires of the future. Yes. And that should be his source of fulfillment. However, in this society today, everybody is under pressure to be a millionaire.
So, Father, let me take this back to parents now in the household. For example, now the average middle-class Nigerian family has a child in secondary school who is doing very well in the sciences, in the arts, is winning prizes, a star student. And then it's time for the career counseling and choice, and the child says, I want to be a teacher.
And the parents say, not in my house.
The average parent will say, a teacher? How can you be a teacher? You're too smart to be a teacher. And, so there is that perception because teaching is such a noble profession. But because maybe a teacher is never going to be rich,
the remuneration
doesn't match up, to the nobility or the honor that goes into teaching. And so your average Nigerian parent doesn't want their child to be a teacher because they have benchmarked success based on material wealth rather than on, fulfillment or contributions to society. So we are indirectly as parents fueling this kind of
parents
mindset.
Are a major source. I mean, are parents not partly responsible for the exam malpractice that is all over the place today? I mean, when parents are bribing teachers and headmasters or principals to quote unquote assist their children to pass exams. So parents are conspirators in all this societal degeneration. But back to the point of the pressure. Part of it perhaps is the entire leadership question, the failure of leadership in our society, because the same teaching profession you're talking about, the people of Sweden, who are claimed to have the best educational system in the world today, people compete to go into teaching. But they also make teaching attractive.
Yes.
The senator in Sweden does not earn more than the teacher, the high school teacher or the elementary school teacher in Sweden. Now, the leaders planned it that way because they had the future generation in mind. And any society that has the future generation in mind, you will do something about education, especially elementary education.
Yes.
But see what we have in our society.
And then, the other dimension to it is also the content of what we're teaching children. So, we had spoken in the earlier segment about those institutions. So you have the institutions that tend to shape children. You have the family,
Yes.
you have the churches, you have the schools, where the churches are preaching a gospel of prosperity.
So what do you
The
expect?
children grow up aspiring to be rich. And then in the secular education system, there isn't that much being taught about values. There's a lot of academic content. And I know back in the day, there were things like moral instruction and those kind of subjects. I haven't seen that much of that, like things teaching people about kindness, about humility, about simplicity, about charity
even
in
the
schools.
dignity in labor that was taught by schools, having farms and having crafts, arts and crafts, the dignity in labor that those exercises taught people.
Yeah.
Many schools now have no land for farm. They don't know anything about going to farm. Most schools, when I went to school, most schools had large plots of land that were farms, and every student
Was
did
required
some. Yes.
do some labor.
So it's a major problem, and now we are all being hoarded into a kind of life of just grabbing and grabbing and gathering and gathering. Then we have the media angle. Social media, regular media. What are the kind of things being advertised?
Yeah.
What are we presenting to our children as the good life? As symbols and images of the successful life.
Yeah.
I remember saying to people that I went to a school and I asked the children in Form 1 what they would like to become, and a child said, this is a 12-year-old child, said that I would like to be a celebrity. And I said, celebrity in what? And he said, celebrity in anything.
Yes, because that's what he or she sees, like celebrity. So what is a celebrity? Is there someone who, some company picks some people, maybe, I don't know the criteria they use to select people.
To be an ambassador.
Not just to be an ambassador, Father. You pick some 12 young people, and then you put them in a house together, and then put cameras on them for a period of 6 weeks, and, it's called Big Brother. And then somebody wins some millions of dollars for just staying in the house there.
And doing some stupid things.
Yeah, becomes a celebrity at the end of the day. And then he gets invited to all the shows to speak. He gets endorsements from the media. And, I look at it and I say, what is the value that this person has brought to the society for which he or she is now being celebrated? And there's nothing tangible that you can put
That
your
is
hands
how
on.
empty our culture is getting. In a program like ours, where we are discussing values and virtues, we really need to interrogate these things. And I have been saying that the people in the media themselves, they are a product of the same society. So if they went to school, as we are saying, and they never got the kind of values we are talking about, a number of people in the media, both the traditional media and the social media, if they never get those values from their churches or mosques, if they go to their churches and all they are talking about is prosperity, and pastor is referring to the wristwatch he's wearing as expect the cost, and the shoes is wearing, and so on, and pastor's wife is adorned like a show glass lady, then what are we communicating? So at the end of the day, you can't even blame the media person because he doesn't know better. So what is it that we must do to turn things around? Because if we do not do something, if we do not change our course, we will end up where we are headed. A very empty, opaque culture that has nothing to offer the coming generation.
Yeah. And I think, Father, we have to start somewhere. I know that there are people who share these kinds of concerns about the way that we're going. Let me just give an example. Like a couple of days ago, I don't know, you might have seen this in the media as well. Google was doing some launch in Lagos, and they released a list of the top 10 search terms on Google from Nigeria.
Okay.
And it was things like how to dance shaku shaku. I don't know if you know about shaku shaku.
So of all the things
it
in
was
the world,
things like Big Brother Nigeria, and it was things like how to cook banga soup. And so, how to cook banga soup was a little bit more encouraging. Maybe some people are trying to improve their cooking skills, but there was a lot of outcry, at least on social media, because people kept asking, is this what our young people are interested in?
Yeah.
And so, hearing the voices of people complaining and protesting that they would have expected young people to be searching things like scholarships,
Yes.
or how I can get into the study X course, or,
Yes.
rather than how to dance shaku shaku and the rest. So people share the concerns, but I think maybe we just need more people in positions of authority and influence to start talking about these things. So, a starting point is like talking about it on shows like this, because until we change the way we're conditioning the young,
Yes.
you can't make a change.
The challenge is, how do you convince the young person that has been brought up in this kind of empty, hollow, shallow culture
Yeah.
that it will not satisfy him? That as
There
he
are
gets
ways.
older, he needs some more concrete stuff.
Yes. And there are ways, I believe there are ways. There's this joke about, when you say to a fish, you are swimming in water. He doesn't understand what you're saying because
Yes.
all he knows is water.
Yes.
So, but I'll give you an example would be a high school, like the school that some of my kids had gone to, taking those children during the vacation on a compulsory service assignment. And it is compulsory. You must do it. And, they put you in a situation, it could be in a village somewhere, to teach the children, the poorer children, or take you to an orphanage, or, to a old people's home, and you help to care for the old people. And those children, they do that for 6 weeks, and they come back with an appreciation of what it's like to serve.
We have fantastic testimonies from the short one-day excursion we do to the slums.
To the slums.
During our prefects workshop.
Absolutely.
Meaning that if they did that for 6 weeks, it can be life transforming.
It can be life transforming, and they come back and they say that, oh wait, there's a lot more to the world than what I was thinking. Imagine these poor kids, if I could make a difference
Yes.
in their life. And all of a sudden you're thinking, you want to buy, you're saying, oh mommy, I need a new pair of Nikes. But then a new pair of Nikes costs 50,000 naira. And you saw kids in the slum who needed 3,000 naira for school fees for a term. And you hear kids saying, you know what, with that 50,000 naira, I could put 10 kids or 20 kids through school. And the joy that the child experiences by doing that. But we need to keep exposing them.
A 14-year-old came from America last year that I put in the slum to help the class that I'm helping in the slum. And after 2-3 weeks of helping in that slum, he went back determined to save money to give scholarship to one or two of those children.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's not about telling his parents to save money. He wants to save his own pocket money.
Yeah.
So it is true that a lot of these children is because they don't know better. They have not been helped to see another aspect
something
of life.
More.
And to recognize that it is through serving, not by grabbing, that you get happiness. It is by serving others that the real, authentic, lasting happiness comes to you. So many of these kind of things, and it's like, I don't know, we the older ones, we are not able to catch up on social media with these young ones, because the number of hits that if your son Elochukwu were on social media, the number of hits he will be getting, I will not get that. So how do we transmit these values to these people who are quote unquote social media celebrities, so that what they issue out daily on social media, how do we get our social media icons and celebrities to embrace some of these values, so that what they bring out and all the following they get can begin to see some of this?
And that's it, Father, you've just said it. There are people who are recognized as social media celebrities or influencers, and they actually span. Some of them are really very purpose-driven people. There are some who are more on the flamboyant side, that are more concerned about entertainment type things, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Entertainment has its value and has also created, some jobs for our people. But it's to pick out people who are really promoting value. They're social media influencers from the point of view of value. And I do know some of them on social media. I know a couple of people who have up to 100,000 followers on social media. And very often, you know, they put out appeals to help people who are in need. And, you know, they maybe go to the hospital, make some presentations to the people, and they come back, they put the pictures on social media. And that encourages, you know, more people to give. So there are people who influence. And I think it's to find those people.
To exploit those ones.
Yes, and see how, you know, we can promote them a lot better. And then also, I mean, the challenges of leadership in Nigeria, they are enormous. I don't think we can tackle that. But, you know, I think we need to find people who are more purposeful and focused
as
and
leaders.
Find a way that we can get them into
leadership position. I mean, the whole tragedy of leadership in this country, it's a sad situation. We had a leader in Africa, Julius Nyerere, who was recognized as a teacher, and he taught the people. I mean, we need leaders that are teachers. We need leaders that will have quotable quotes, so that you can say, oh, this 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 6 quotes of our leader, they are the things that are guiding me.
And those quotes have to come from leaders who are walking the talk.
That's what I'm saying.
As well, you need to see in their life that they're actually living out what they're teaching.
I mean, like the example I gave, Julius Nyerere, he lived what he taught.
Absolutely.
And that is why several years after his death, he remains the most popular leader in that country, and perhaps in the whole of Africa, because he lived simple life, humble life, unassuming. He left power, and the friends had to gather to look for a place for him to live, because he didn't have a house, as it were. We really need to do a lot of work in raising leaders, meaning there is a lot of work to engineer our society in a different way.
And to engineer the electoral process further, because the way the electoral process is currently constructed does not encourage people of integrity to aspire to position, as you well know, as you can see
you
from
mean you can't,
what is going on in the political space.
You mean after going so high in the civil society and in the NGO circles, you will not come out now
I could not survive in the political milieu, because the kind of things you would be expected to do to be able to, you know, get yourself in a place where you can aspire to leadership.
Including having most of the meetings in the dead of night.
Meetings in the night is perhaps the lesser of the evils. We all know, you know, all kinds of things that go on, the occultic practices, assassinations, slander, bribery that goes on in the political space.
What a pity if with all your experience, and including the kind of experience we shared in this program, if you cannot come out now and say, look, I am retiring from the NGO circles, I want to go into politics to serve my community here in Abuja or in Anambra State, which is really a pity. I pray for a day when people like this, all of which we have them all over the place, will feel safe, will feel comfortable, will feel that they will not compromise their values in going into politics. May that day come sooner than later. Amen. Thank you, Dr. Nwosu, for coming on this program.